You know, I did John Landis's first film, Schlock, and I was 20 years old and he was 21. And as I was making him up, he was talking to me about his next movie, which was going to be American Werewolf in London. So right away, started thinking about it. And then cut to, many years later, it turned out, Schlock was, a $30,000, independent and low-budget film, and nobody was really banging down John's door to make American Werewolf. And so I had a long time to think about it. Monster movies are what got me into this business, and I especially liked, animal people like the Wolfman and the transformation. So I really wanted to make this the coolest werewolf movie we could make. I remember having arguments with John because I wanted him to be a biped, a two-legged werewolf, because I always think of werewolves more like that, basically probably just because of the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. walking around on two legs. He kept saying he wanted it to be this demon hound from hell. When John said he wanted it to be, a quadruped all four like that, I wasn't quite sure how to do it even. I thought, how am I going to do that? How am I going to do, can I put two people in a suit? No, that's going to look dumb, And it was one of those things that, like, in the middle of the night, I happened to think of it, and it was remembering as a child where you do the wheelbarrow race thing where people hold your feet and you're walking on your hands. And I thought, if we did something like that, if we put a guy kind of on a board where he was actually walking on hands with a board with wheels on it, and we could puppeteer the hind legs and they were rod puppeted. We could have him really, so he could move up and down with it and really have his hands on a contracted ground like that. And so that's basically what we did. We had a guy lying on this plank with wheels on it, with a wolf suit around it, and in the rear end of you never saw the rear end of the wolf, because what happened at the rear end of the wolf, there were 2 feet sticking out of his rear, and the guy who was inside. I had a dog at the time that was a Keeshond that had some kind of big mane of fur and stuff, and it ended up, the werewolf ended up looking very much like my dog Bosco that I had at the time, because it was a good reference to look at, But he did, I think the wolf is very cool. John always said he was never going to show him for only just a few frames, and I intentionally sculpted a very extreme expression on him so that in a very short amount of time you could see that he was this, evil hound creature.
I love you, David.
At the time, it was the first film where I really had a crew to speak of. I had one assistant before that. On this film, I had, I think, 6 people helping me, and they were all kids. They were fans of mine that wrote me fan mail. And, one guy was from Texas, and then, another guy was from Connecticut, and there were kids that I brought out and basically trained. And we, to be honest, we didn't really quite know what we were doing. We were in uncharted ground, basically. People hadn't done this kind of work before.
Jack, what? Where are we going? I don't know. I'll tell you when we get there. Okay.
In the script, it says that, Jack, who was played by Griffin Dunn, his throat is torn out by this wolf. And, half his face is missing, and he continues to degenerate through the course of the film. So I did basically what I thought that would look like, which was this big, hideous, wound in his neck and a very scarred up face. And Griffin, on the first day that he did the makeup test, wasn't too pleased about it. He thought no one was really going to look at him because he was so horrifying looking and disgusting, and he was disgusting looking. People always seem to remember there's a little piece of flesh that wiggled on his neck, they always stare, and he's probably right. I think there are times where instead of looking at his performance, you're looking at the little piece of wiggly flesh, but
the wolf's bloodline must be severed. The last remaining werewolf must be destroyed. It's you, David.
It was, a series of different makeups. Each time we saw him, he was more decomposed, so that means we had to resculpt and make new pieces.
Oh, be serious, would you?
The process of makeup is an additive process. You add to someone's face, and it's easier to make someone look fatter. It's very difficult to make them thinner because we really can't subtract from what's already there. And as you're decomposing, you become very skull-like. It's very difficult. So what usually happens when you do a makeup like that, you end up building the cheekbones out and building the rest of it out so that it becomes hollow-looking. But it gets big, and I thought, why can't we make it a puppet? I thought, we do a puppet, we actually can subtract. So what I actually did was had a life cast of Griffin done that I did a clay press out, and I had a clay version of it, and I actually carved in where it should go in, and sculpted basically what Griffin's skull would look like, and then we were able to make a much more emaciated, dead-looking character that way.
You look awful.
Thank you.
In the scene in the porno theater, he's a puppet, and Griffin actually operated the mouth of the puppet, and as he read the dialogue.
I want you to meet some people. David Kessler, this is Gerald Bringsley. Gerald's the man you murdered on the subway. We thought it best for you not to see him, as he's a fresh kill and still pretty messy.
Yes. I do look most unpleasant.
Why are you doing this to me?
This isn't Mr. Goodman's idea. He's your good friend, whereas I am a victim of your carnivorous lunar activities.
John said he wanted to do a transformation in a way that hadn't been done before, where it wasn't just like Lon Chaney Jr. and the Wolfman, where they sit him in a chair and do lap dissolves, do a little bit of makeup and shoot some film and do a little bit more and overlap the two. He says it seems to him that, if your whole body is changing into a different creature, it would be a painful experience, and he wanted to show the pain and have movement. I, at one point, was pushing to try to make it all happen in one shot. I thought it would be really spectacular. John pointed out that he thought it wouldn't be as dramatic. He thought it would be better filmmaking to do it in cuts and to show different things in close-up. And as it turns out, that was about the only way we really could do it.
Someone I really would care for, then suddenly there appeared for me the only then I heard somebody whisper, please adore me. And when I looked, the moon had turned to gold. Help me!
One of the things we did do, like, for example, like I said, David had basically a hairless chest, and we ended up with a very hairy chest on him. We actually did the hairy chest first, shot that stuff, and then trimmed the hair back and pulled off some hair and shot an earlier stage, and then pulled off some more hair and trimmed it back and shot an earlier stage so we could get more makeups done in one day. I eventually came up with the idea of, besides having his hairs grow out, we could actually distort the face and have something pushing underneath it and have it change. So we made what we called change-o heads and change-o hands and change-o backs, which were prop likeness heads and hands and so on that actually physically had a mechanism inside that would distort it into a different shape. So I was afraid that the foam latex that we normally use wouldn't stretch out far enough for these change-o heads, so we went to a urethane elastomer that we could plasticize and highly plasticize, and we plasticized it about twice as much as you're supposed to. and it made this very stretchy, flesh-like material, but it eventually continued to plasticize, and it just turned itself into goo and just disintegrated. But it lasted long enough to get the film done anyways. The transformation didn't really take all that long to actually shoot the physical things. And these change-o heads that we made, John would say action, and it would go and stretch out, and you go cut, and it's like, okay, we've got that. And it's like, we've got that. I just spent months working on this thing, and you shot, it took you 10 seconds to shoot it, Well, I got it, It's like, well, God, it was like disappointing to think of all that time going into that. But then I went with my crew of kids, to Westwood to see the movie when it came out with a real audience. And when that 10 seconds happened of that face stretching out, people stood up and cheered, and it was like, all right, this is why we did that.
Without a dream in mind, without a love, without
it was funny, as many times happens in the industry, American Werewolf kind of set the standard for what a monster movie was going to be and how a transformation was going to be done. And every film after that had a transformation, and it did what we did. And I would actually love to have the opportunity to do a transformation in a film like American Werewolf again. I would definitely take advantage of computer technology as well. I think a real marriage of the techniques, and you could do a transformation that would just totally blow people away. And I hope I get the opportunity in my lifetime to do it again.